Welcome to Capitol Update, your review of state government for the week ending Friday, June 13th. I'm Rebecca Baer. Late this afternoon, House and Senate budget chairs reached an agreement on the dollar amounts in the state budget, but we're still working on implementing and conforming bills and tax cuts. Once the budget is printed and delivered to members, a 72-hour cooling off period begins before the full House and Senate can vote on it. But we do know before all the details are released is that it's a budget with less state spending than we've seen in recent years, and it includes $830 million to reduce state debt. Capitol Update's Mike LaQuia reports.
Chamber leaders say the budget dollars are settled with about 2 weeks to spare before the new fiscal year starts.
Come July 1, nobody wanted the government shut down. Nobody wanted employees to be without a paycheck. We're working, 12, 14, 16 hours a day to get a responsible, balanced budget in front of the two bodies.
Budget chairs say federal COVID dollars are long gone and the growth in state revenue is projected to slow down.
So I think what this budget represents is a recalibration of spending practices to a place that we believe is sustainable for the long haul in the future success of the state.
The House and Senate agreed to increase the money available for teachers' salaries by $102 million. The chambers also agreed to increase the amount of money school districts would be required to put into traditional public schools by more than $500 million. That money generally comes from local property taxes.
I think we can all agree that the public school population is declining. But schools still are open and operating, so there's still that expense is there, and if there's fewer students being there, then the money comes from somewhere.
The House and Senate also agreed on $88 million for high school construction projects in DeSoto, Hendry, and Wakulla counties. At the university level, they have $40 million for a building at the FAMU FSU College of Engineering, $25 million for an academic support building at FSU, as well as $20 million for an FSU Veterans Legacy Complex. FIU has $54 million for a med school clinical facility. UF has $47.5 million for a dental school building and $25 million for the Norman Fixel Institute for Neurological Diseases. One of the issues the budget chairs have been wrestling with is what to do with vacant state positions, thousands of them across the state. Let's say these 3 parking spaces are each a state position. What supervisors have been doing is taking money from one empty spot and giving it to other people so that they make more money and don't leave for better paying jobs. This has been happening a lot in the Department of Children and Families.
They're not true vacancies, they're FTEs to plus up. So then instead of doing that exercise, why don't we just understand what we need and how much it costs and apply it? We're not offended per se by the value proposition. We're more disturbed by the accounting practices.
The chambers also agreed to a 2% pay increase for state workers with a minimum increase of $1,000 a year. State law enforcement and firefighters get more, a 10% increase or a 15% increase if they have 5 or more years of experience. In state courts, the House and Senate agreed to add 37 more circuit and county court judges. Once lawmakers pass the budget, the governor will have the chance to sign it, make light on vetoes, or veto the whole thing. For the Florida Channel, I'm Mike LaQuia.
Florida's Attorney General held a news conference in Titusville this week to announce that lethal force can and will be used if protests in Florida become violent. He referred to immigration protests in Los Angeles and plans for demonstrations around Florida and the nation this weekend.
If you're a family out there, you're driving, and all of a sudden you get surrounded by one of these angry demonstrations that's turned violent, you don't need to sit there and wait while people smash your window and damage your vehicle and put your family in jeopardy. You drive. Just drive. Get yourself out of harm's way. If somebody's in front of you and they're threatening your vehicle, you just drive.
The Attorney General invited Brevard County Sheriff Wayne Ivey to speak. Ivey said he and other sheriffs around the state won't tolerate violence, especially against law enforcement.
If you try to mob rule a car in Brevard County, gathering around it, refusing to let the driver leave, in our county, you're most likely going to get run over and dragged across the street. If you spit on us, you're going to the hospital and in jail. If you hit one of us, you're going to the hospital and jail and most likely get bitten by one of our big, beautiful dogs that we have here. If you throw a brick, a firebomb, or point a gun at one of our deputies, we will be notifying your family where to collect your remains at, because we will kill you graveyard dead. We're not going to play.
The sheriff and attorney general cited House Bill 1, signed into law by the governor in 2021. It was a response to protests and riots around the country after the murder of George Floyd. It increases criminal penalties for engaging in a riot or encouraging one, and for violence against people and property during a protest. You may have noticed Senator Debbie Mayfield at that news conference. She won a special election this week to return to the Senate. Mayfield was elected to the Florida House in 2008, then the Senate in 2016. When she termed out last year, she ran again for the House and won. But her Senate seat opened up when Senator Randy Fine ran for Congress. The Secretary of State said she could not run because she'd hit the term limit. She challenged that in the Supreme Court, which ruled that once she left the Senate, the term limit clock started over again. Another Republican, Brian Hodgers, won Mayfield's vacant House seat in Brevard County. Hodgers is an insurance agent with a background in real estate. In another special election, Nathan Boyles won an open House seat in Santa Rosa and Okaloosa counties. Boyles owns a sanitation business and was a county commissioner in Okaloosa County. The University System Board of Governors is scheduled to meet June 18th with 3 university presidents on the agenda. Trustees at FAMU and Florida International have already approved contracts for their incoming presidents. This week, trustees at the University of West Florida's board voted on a contract for their choice as interim president. Education Commissioner Manny Diaz. Capitol Update's Vance Osteen has the story.
The contract for interim president Manny Diaz includes a base salary of $643,000. Several members of the board questioned the salary, citing Diaz's position as an interim president.
Here we are, and we've got an interim president. I wish we would not have the compensation be more than the base compensation of our current president as the interim president.
The contract also includes several additional provisions proposed by Diaz himself. One of those would revise the contract's termination clause, a change which trustee Alonzi Scott criticized for deviating from the standard language found in other state university contracts.
There's a section there that talks about we've changed from all the other contracts that I reviewed in the state. There are some that had one word in 10C that says conviction of the interim president in court of law for a felony. That word was changed from indictment. I wonder why we would want to do something that all the other state universities have that word indictment versus conviction.
Sure, Matthew. Sure. Some conduct that Trustee Scott is concerned about, wouldn't that be covered by the very next clause? Removal for any conduct constituting moral turpitude that would bring public disrespect, contempt, or ridicule upon UWF. So I think, Trustee Scott, at least from my reading, many of your concerns would be covered by that subsequent clause.
I don't think they would, sir. I respectfully disagree. That's why all the other contracts have that in their contracts. That doesn't amount to very much. That's just saying, hey, I morally agree. Heck, you could be a criminal and be morally agreeable to continue to operate.
The contract also raises the number of trustee votes needed to terminate the interim president from half to a 2/3 majority. It also includes a severance package.
I believe there's a section that's been added to the contract for severance pay. I looked at all the other contracts again, and none of them have that in it. So I'm trying to, why would I want to pay someone severance pay if they're removing themselves or being removed for cause or any other action?
Other members of the board took issue with the amount of time they had to review the contract before taking a vote.
In section 2.1 of the trustee bylaws, it states that if additional items or supporting documentation become available, a supplemental agenda will be provided at least 3 days prior to the meeting. I understand that things come up, but I only received my supplemental agenda 2 days before this meeting. And I personally feel a bit uncomfortable voting on such an important item when I had less than 72 hours notice to review the item.
The Florida A&M Board of Trustees approved a contract for their incoming president, Marva Johnson. If the Board of Governors approves, she'll get a $650,000 base salary, plus retention and performance bonuses. Kristen Harper, one of the 3 trustees to vote against the contract, called the salary a sweetheart deal.
Had I negotiated this contract, as chairs normally do in circumstances where a chair is elected to represent a body, this would have been more of a pay-for-performance contract and not one that certainly exceeds not only history, but the present as it relates to the compensation study that we have reviewed.
In spite of those concerns, both contracts were approved and teed up for final consideration by the Board of Governors. For Capitol Update, I'm Vance Osteen.
The State Gaming Control Commission is changing their rules to help support compulsive gamblers. Under current rules, casinos have to provide the commission with lists of people who have been banned from their facilities. The information then becomes public record. Sometimes people who struggle with gambling addiction put themselves on those lists, and now state regulators are amending the rules to clarify that those names do not have to be turned over.
And I don't think it serves anyone, the facilities, the patron, the regulator, to be potentially causing embarrassment or shame for someone who's taken a step to remove themselves from a situation they find themselves uncomfortable in.
The commission voted to move forward with publishing the proposed rule. Commission staff say the casinos themselves asked for the clarification. The governor signed 4 bills into law designed to help protect children and others against sexual crimes, and he committed to signing a 5th when the legislature sends it to him. In Jacksonville, he signed into law House Bill 777, which increases penalties for luring a child out of a structure or vehicle. House Bill 1351 expands requirements for registering sexual offenders and requires law enforcement to verify the location of predators at least 4 times a year. House Bill 1161 requires digital platforms to remove deep fake sexual images of someone when the victim asks them to, and he signed House Bill 1455, which creates mandatory minimum sentences for registered sexual offenders or predators.
These offenders, sexual offenders, they are going to reoffend, right? So you can put them away for the maximum and say someone gets a 15-year sentence and they serve it, they come out, the chance of them reoffending is very, very high when you start talking about these sexual predators. And so you got to have a minimum amount of time that they're just taken off the streets. Ultimately, the registry, all these things, they're tools, but the only thing that really, really guarantees the safety of the children is to find every last daggum predator and put them in jail.
The governor also said he'll sign Senate Bill 1804 when he gets it from the legislature. That bill mandates life in prison or the death penalty for people who traffic children under 12 or people who are mentally incapacitated. This week, the governor and cabinet heard about the results of paying off state debt early and approved creating more conservation land in North Florida. Capitol Update's Mike Laquia shows us where.
The governor and cabinet approved more than 76,000 acres in conservation easements in Baker, Union, and Bradford counties at a cabinet meeting on June 10. The easements come at a cost of $117 million. The new easements connect a 100-mile network of conservation land between the Ocala and Osceola National Forests. The cabinet also heard about savings to the state by paying off some state debt early. Last year, the legislature designated $500 million to pay off debt.
This is the first time we've actually appropriated extra money to accelerate debt reduction as opposed to just not issuing new money bonds and doing the normal amortization. So we've accelerated the longer-term trend and put ourselves in a great position financially as a consequence of that.
Bond managers say paying off these bonds will save the state $362 million. $10 billion in state debt remains, amounting to $481 per resident. The cabinet also heard about a shift in state investments away from Chinese companies. Overall, Florida has more than $208 billion in the state pension fund that is invested all over the world. A law signed in 2024 requires the State Board of Administration to move state investments out of Chinese companies.
The board was supportive and was pushing you in that direction, but you did it in a way that honored the fiduciary obligation, but has now massively limited the exposure to China for obvious reasons.
Administrators say the state previously had nearly $2 billion invested in Chinese companies. For the Florida Channel, I'm Mike Lacuya.
The governor and members of the cabinet also serve as the state's clemency board. This week, they granted more than 40 pardons to people who were convicted of crimes in the past and now want their records cleared and civil rights restored. Capitol Update's Melissa Klinzing reports.
The governor asked every applicant what crime they committed and why they deserve a pardon.
You want to tell us what you did and why we should grant you the relief?
I was ran an escort service racketeering, and before that I was an insurance agent, and I took everything for granted, and to be honest, greed got the best of me.
One applicant admitted she committed insurance fraud in Miami 25 years ago.
My life, it has been really a change about that, because it's every time you get, that you go around and apply for jobs and this, you're afraid that that's going to come out. And it's very embarrassed even to be here.
Both of those applicants got the pardons they asked for. Applicants are also asked how they've turned their lives around. For some, it helped that a member of the board knows them personally.
I became a business owner. Years down the road, I opened up a boxing gym. I was a mentor for a lot of young men in my community.
I've known Sal many years, and we've got several members of our community here today. If you look at the very impressive list of folks from our community that has vouched for him, law enforcement, a judge, former Secretary of State, we all know Sal, and he's got a great painting business there in our local community, has done many events for children in our community to help keep them on the straight and narrow path. And I think he's a good man and would recommend him for this pardon.
Okay. All right. I move to grant the pardon. Second? Third? Congratulations.
Thank you.
The board also considers any run-ins with the law applicants have had in the years since their original crimes. The governor questioned one man who served time for growing marijuana 25 years ago.
It seems like you have a conviction for DUI with damage and personal injury from 2012. Is that correct?
Yes,
what happened there?
So I worked for an alcohol company, and I was just kind of out one night visiting a bunch of accounts, and shouldn't have been behind the wheel of the car, but I was. And I got into an accident. Some gentleman hit me, and it was very unfortunate. He was injured, and that was also an extreme turning point for me, because I was kind of like, I need to take my life a little bit more seriously when it comes to that.
He was the only applicant interviewed in person who was not pardoned on the spot.
Look, I think you're making a good faith effort, but I'm a little concerned about this DUI issue. I'm going to probably do a little bit more research into what all happened there, because I think that was a lapse in judgment. So I'm going to take it under advisement, and then we'll render a decision at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me.
The Clemency Board had 54 applications to consider. Most were pardoned, some cases were continued, and 7 were denied. For Capitol Update, I'm Melissa Klinzing.
Executives at the state-backed Citizens Property Insurance say new software is stopping potential customers from getting coverage with Citizens. Company executives want Citizens to have fewer policies, since that ultimately means less risk to the state if major storms hit. Insurance agents first now have to use software called Easy Links to see if new customers are eligible for Citizens. Executives say 22% of the time the software finds a competitive price in the private market that makes homeowners ineligible. Currently, the software is used only for potential new customers, but starting in September, Citizens will expect insurance agents to use it for existing customers at the time of their annual insurance renewal. Hundreds of thousands of Citizens policies have moved to the private market in the last year. A cabinet vacancy has left a state commission short of members. Florida's most recent chief financial officer, Jimmy Patronis, left the job earlier this year to run for Congress, and the governor has yet to fill the position, creating what one state official called an unusual situation for a state board known as the Commission on Hurricane Loss Projection Methodology.
The commission's governing statute states that the chief financial officer member appointments serve on the commission until the end of the term of office of the CFO who appointed them. And Jimmy Patronis resigned from his position as CFO effective March 31st of this year. And at that time, the 5 commission members appointed by him became ineligible to serve on the commission.
The 12-member commission is tasked with evaluating computer models that project losses from hurricanes and floods. Insurance companies use them to set premium rates. At its latest meeting, the commission had a quorum, but only because all the other members were in attendance. They did have to elect a new chair, voting for FAMU FSU engineering professor Sean Martin, who presided over meetings this week. The commission's previous chair was a Patronis appointee. An empty plot of land in Wakulla County may soon be the location of a new factory. The governor went to small-town Crawfordville in the Panhandle to announce plans for a development called Opportunity Park.
Earlier this year, I announced $3.5 million to Wakulla County for the development and construction of 2 county-owned buildings at Opportunity Park. Now, these facilities, I think it's over 100,000. Each of them are over 100,000 square feet. They will be able to house high-skilled, high-wage jobs in targeted industries and help drive long-term economic development in the region.
The $3.5 million announced in April is on top of $4.5 million from the state's Rural Infrastructure Fund announced last year. The governor said Triumph Gulf Coast is kicking in another $13.5 million. That's the organization set up to manage funds from the BP oil spill settlement.
And I'm proud that because of this, that Point Blank Enterprises is a leading manufacturer of body armor and protective solutions for law enforcement and military personnel, that they are going to expand into this new facility.
Point Blank displayed examples of their products at the event. The governor said the company is expected to create at least 300 jobs. Staff and visitors at a state park on the Central Coast are mourning their resident hippopotamus. Lu the Florida hippopotamus was one of a kind. The hippo, a fixture at Ellie Schiller Homosassa Springs Wildlife State Park, died on June 8th. He was born at the San Diego Zoo. He came to Homosassa in 1964 after a career as a movie and TV star. When the state bought the park, previously known as Nature World, in 1989, park officials considered moving Lu to a zoo because they wanted to spotlight wildlife native to Florida. But then Governor Lawton Chiles granted Lu Honorary Florida citizenship, making him the one and only Florida hippopotamus. For decades, each January, visitors joined park staff in celebrating Lu's birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lu. Singing to him as he scarfed down a fruit and veggie cake. Park staff say he was more than just an animal in a park. In a statement, they said he was a friend and treasured member of the community. Lu was 65 years old. The Swanee River Water Management District voted to begin a study that aims to protect Gulf sturgeon, a threatened species of fish in the Swanee River. Researchers with the U.S. Geological Survey will conduct the study. They'll tag and track the fish to determine if the river's minimum flows and water levels are enough to allow them to pass over river shoals to get to their spawning areas. Minimum flows are set by water management districts across the state to prevent harm associated with water withdrawals. The sturgeon study is expected to last 4 years, and staff say it will likely be funded through a state appropriation. Now here's a look at some of the other things happening in state government this week. This week, the man who blew the whistle on a plan to put hotels and golf courses in state parks sued the state for wrongful termination. James Gaddis worked for the Department of Environmental Protection. His whistleblower lawsuit says he was ordered to draw up maps for the plan and not tell anyone about it. He revealed the plan to a person the lawsuit doesn't identify, and the next day, the Tampa Bay Times had the story. DEP fired him. Protesters rallied around the state once the parks plan went public. Last month, the legislature passed a bill that bans hotels, golf courses, and other commercial development at state parks. The governor signed it into law on May 22nd. The parks bill was just one of more than 250 approved by the legislature this session. We highlight some of them in an upcoming edition of Florida Crossroads. House Bill 209, the ban on commercializing state parks, flew through House and Senate committees and got unanimous votes on the floor. Others had a tougher row to hoe, including this year's Farm Bill, which bans fluoride in drinking water.
Let's call it what it is. This is a gift to conspiracy theories at the expense of common sense and public health.
This is not about fluoride. This is about your liberty. This is not, sir, about conspiracy. We left conspiracy at the door. Today we deal in facts. The proposition I present to you, members, is, does the government have the right, by a mere simple majority vote, to put medicines and drugs and chemicals into your body that you did not consent to?
The legislature also approved bills designed to help school kids who have diabetes or severe allergies, and another that requires law enforcement to have probable cause before they come on your boat to do this.
Flares, fire extinguisher, and a sound producing device. So I can see a whistle right there. Perfect.
I have a neighbor who was stopped 3 times in one day last year for no reason, just a random safety inspection. That's got to stop, and it's going to stop today.
Details on those new laws and more on the next edition of Florida Crossroads 2025 Session Recap, premiering Monday, June 16th. Check local listings for times in your area or watch anytime at thefloridachannel.org. And that's it for this edition of Capitol Update. From all of us, thanks for watching.